Welcome to the world of Dynasty where positional need is gone, team need is gone, you don't have to start players, and so everything that you try to do to win a championship during the season doesn't matter, and now you're in the offseason, and everything is different now, right? Again, you talk about you have 250 days until you need to start players again, and so what it really takes to dominate a Dynasty league, what it really takes to build a Dynasty team that is actually going to be a Dynasty itself is making that mental flip from now I'm playing fantasy football, I'm trying to win at fantasy football, I'm trying to make trades to win at fantasy football, to I am playing the market. And we obviously, this is where we live, we thrive, we kind of dwell in the caves of market value, and then we pop out every January and we're like, oh, hello, here we go. And we're going to talk about how we're going to implement that for our Dynasty teams this offseason. I mentioned positional need irrelevant. So we talk a lot about, we have a lot of questions even about roster construction. Roster construction doesn't matter anymore, guys. Not right now, it doesn't. Again, you have 250 days until you have to start players again. So you don't need 3 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 5 wide receivers, 10 total wide receiver running back. You don't need it. It's great because you don't need it because you're not starting players again. And if you try to build your Dynasty roster around positional need, around roster construction, around team need, around whatever, what's going to end up happening is you're going to put yourself at a value disadvantage because you're not optimizing where your value is and what your value is going to do as the offseason goes on. The main point, and what we're going to talk about in this video, is the main point of the Dynasty offseason as a whole is making sure that your entire portfolio, so your entire team and their associated values, goes up from January to August. And we're going to tell you exactly how to do that so you can master your Dynasty team. And also, this is really the next step of becoming a very dominant Dynasty player. So the first thing I really want to talk about here is that a Dynasty roster can look completely different from January to June. And most of the time, it does look completely different. I'll give you a perfect example here. If you've ever done Dynasty startups at different points in the offseason, you'll know that you can draft a team in January, draft a Dynasty startup team in January, and also draft a Dynasty startup team in June. If you make no changes to both of those teams and you compare them, the January team has the potential, whereas, the June team is probably going to be all the teams are going to be about even, about market value even, because it was just drafted. The January team, without making any trades, in June has potential to be much better because of how the players' values have moved, or much worse. I've drafted teams in January where I've made no moves, gotten to the season, and I'm like, I'm at a huge disadvantage just because of what happened this offseason. And nothing even happened on the field. And so why does this happen? It's because even though the NFL is done, Dynasty's just beginning, and there are things that are happening in the offseason that are absolutely going to affect the Dynasty values of your players. Number one, the market perception of players. For no given reason, the Dynasty market will be this high on a player, and then from January to April, where literally nothing happens with that team or player, they are off in Cancun, their values drops. And all of a sudden, the perception of that Dynasty asset goes way down. Why does this happen? Because people who play Dynasty are humans, and they overanalyze things, and they're bored, and we're idiots, right? That it's boredom. It is boredom at the absolute core. And so because of that, your Dynasty assets can do no wrong and lose 3/4 of their value. Not 3/4. Okay, 1/4 of their value over 4 months. I'm being a little bit dramatic there. But obviously market perception of players comes from a different thing. But a lot of times there's really no reason. A lot of times it's just people's opinions change. That is a very real thing in Dynasty. Free agency. Obviously, free agency changes things not only for the players that are in free agency going to new teams, but the teams they are going to, right? It shifts the entire landscape of the NFL, and it shifts the entire Dynasty landscape in their projected production outlook for the next year as well. NFL trades. This is a big one. You saw Stephon Diggs get traded last year, and you remember all the ripple effects from the values of the Texans players. Even though, Stephon Diggs ended up getting hurt, it did negatively impact the production of Tank Dell, and therefore Tank Dell's value went down, right? The NFL draft, you have running backs getting replaced, wide receivers getting drafted over, quarterbacks getting promising guys you remember the NFL draft last year. It shouldn't have affected Kirk Cousins theoretically, but it did affect his value after Michael Penix was drafted, because it's like, I'm a lot less sure this guy long-term than I would have been. And then training camp. You get into mini camps in the summer, you get into training camp, and then you start hearing the headlines. And again, the market perception of these players starts to change. And so again, a Dynasty roster can look very different from the time you either leave it in January after your season's over, the time you draft in January, to August, when, again, the end goal is to increase in value. And so the key is to find players who are going to increase in value.
Yeah, and how do you do that? Well, we've got a few ways that you can do that, and they work literally every single time. It's just how you execute it.
Yep.
Right? Because the strategy, the concept itself, it works every single year. And we've built dynasties and championship teams. It feels like overnight sometimes based off of what's really happening in the market. So what do? You go for guys who are going to increase in value. Oh, domain guys, it's a lot easier said than done. You don't know who's going to increase in value. Yes, you do.
You actually do.
You actually do. Your productive veterans whose situation has not changed, who are only aging, we say. They inevitably lose value every single offseason. Every single time. Case in point, Joseph Mixon, Alvin Kamara, James Conner, Aaron Jones. I'm trying to think of a ton of other running backs because there are a few other running backs, Josh Jacobs even, who lost a little bit of value there before he got re-signed.
Devontae Adams, Travis
Devontae
Kelce.
Adams, right. I mean, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, right?
Yep.
Every single one of those guys were buys last off season, before the season started, because what did you know was going to happen almost without a shadow of doubt? They were going to produce, again, like they have been for the last 5 years. Guys, it is more likely than not. There are outlier cases. Fall-offs happen. Trends can suggest that a running back is going to be less productive the following year than the year before based off of their age and their touches and all those things. More often than not, the players that have produced for years and years and years are going to continue to produce, barring any sort of dramatic change. We just know that. We just do. Because, again, it worked this year for all these different running backs. It worked the year before that. It did. and that doesn't mean that you should buy Christian McCaffrey at his market price in the 2024 offseason just for him to get injured and not do anything for you this year, right? We didn't like him at price. It is all about the price. But what you do is you evaluate the price of these guys that fall in the offseason based off of what they did the previous season, and you get them at a discount, knowing that they're going to skyrocket up boards more likely than not heading into 2025. Get guys that are value insulated. This insulation is independent, again, of age. They can be 23, they can be 35. If they have value insulation, contract insulation, their situation has not changed dramatically enough to merit any sort of question marks whatsoever, then go invest in them and make sure they're good at football too.
And that's what I was going to say. The caveat I think that we have to kind of adjust here with this process, value insulation does not always come with contract value insulation. Those are contract plays into value insulation, but they're not the same thing, because, one mistake we made was saying, okay, Daniel Jones has this contract insulation, this value insulation.
Even though we knew he was a bad quarterback.
We knew he was a bad quarterback, and we knew he could be easily replaced if he were to not perform, and that's exactly what happened. So really, when we're talking about value insulation, we're talking about positional value insulation, being a wide receiver, being a quarterback, but also being good at football. And so even though somebody may have good contract insulation, if they suck, which you and I both have a mutual understanding of who sucks and who doesn't, or at least who doesn't suck, right? It's really who doesn't suck. If they suck, then they're probably not a value insulated player. Truly, they just have good contract insulation. It's completely different. So know the difference between those two things, and that's definitely a footnote that we're kind of adjusting for this year.
And a little bit of a spoiler, because we're going to mention this guy later in the video, but Brandon Ayuk is a perfect example of this. He has showcased in significant sample sizes, like an entire season, that he can produce as a high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1. And while some of those efficiency metrics are going to go down, like yards per reception and whatnot, he does have good enough contract insulation and enough guys moving out of that offense who are aging out that you can pretty much count on Brandon Ayuk significantly increasing in value heading into 2025. And that's a guy that you would be very comfortable investing in right now, even with the ACL tear. So just keep that in mind again as an example. You've got your polar opposite example like Daniel Jones. You've got a good example right now like Brandon Ayuk. Now you can come back and bring receipts if we're wrong on that take, but we're pretty confident in that one right now. So it was enough for me to bring it up. Now, with all of that, again, you can find valuable players and you can play the market and all of this offseason, but where specifically do you place your value?
Yeah. And I think this is, we're talking about the type of assets to place your value in. And so a good example of this is superstars. And you might say, okay, easier said than done. But what I'm saying here is while we would normally advocate for down tiers, which we still will here in this video because we always advocate for down tiers, up tiering is not a terrible idea during the offseason, especially with more value volatile assets going towards an up tier, because you're placing your value in a player that is a top heavy asset. They're as value insulated as they come, because if they're a top heavy asset, means they're either at a position where the value insulation is greater. So you've got quarterbacks and wide receivers pretty much dominating the first round of Dynasty Superflex drafts, right? And the second round, really. They're either positionally value insulated and they're very good at football. If they're going that high, if they are an elite Dynasty asset, if they're a Dynasty cornerstone, they're that good at football. Those players are good investments during the Dynasty offseason because they're going to be very stable, right? You're not going to see Justin Jefferson go up in value a lot this offseason. He doesn't have much room to go up. But there's really no way he's going to go down in value, right? If we saw Sam Darnold come in and J.J. McCarthy come in to be his quarterbacks and he didn't lose value, he's not going to lose value in almost any situation, right? And so the stability kind of comes from your superstars. And so that's why it's good to hang on to your superstars during the offseason.
But make sure you're not sacrificing value upside in those players with those up tiers.
Exactly. Yep. And so that's the key, is who you use to up tier. And we'll do some more specific trade strategy videos on that. But having your superstars at some points, for rebuilds, for contenders alike, down tiering was a good idea during the offseason to get production, but now production doesn't matter at all. And so now if you have superstars, you hold them, or you think about going and getting superstars with, again, some of your more value volatile assets that have less upside, and that's important. Rookie picks, you should place your value in rookie picks. This is value that's guaranteed to go up. So again, you're kind of mixing value statuses here in your portfolio. You've got guaranteed stable value, and so this is basically going to be, again, we relate to the stock market a lot. It is the stock market. Your guaranteed kind of stable, maybe go up or maintain value, is going to be more like your mutual funds, right? And then you've got your really what a rookie pick is. There's not really a stock market equivalent to it. I mean, I guess you could say it's like the S&P 500, but over a 3-year span where it's probably going to go up 9-10%, right? And so, with rookie picks, this is value that's guaranteed to go up. So you're combining these two assets, your superstars, your rookie picks, and it's a slight trend up already for your value portfolio. That's the good thing about these two assets is that right now we haven't done any decreasing in value yet. And you might say easier said than done. Market followers. This is value that's likely to go up, right? Not guaranteed like rookie picks, but this is likely to go up. And Nathan mentioned Brandon Ayuk. He's a great example. He is likely to go up in value because I don't think he can go much lower. We talk about Rashee Rice because of the injury and because of the situation. He's likely to go up in value. He's not likely to go down in value. And so situational analysis is where this is going to be very important, because this is where you're going to find market fallers. They're falling for one reason or another, and you can invest in them, and they're probably going to go back up, right? And then the last type of asset you should invest in, place your value in, young players with high upside. And we're going to have examples of all of those type of guys. I'll start with the first one here. Here's some examples of the type of players you should invest in this Dynasty offseason and why you should invest in them based on what we just told you, what categories they fit from a value standpoint. Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott is value insulated because he's at the quarterback position. He's value insulated because he's not in danger of being replaced by another quarterback this offseason. He's not going to get replaced. And he also is, from a value standpoint in his outlook, he is likely going to increase in value. He's not a rookie pick, so he's not guaranteed, but all the players, you're looking at Dak Prescott, and he's now being valued in the 7th, 8th round. He's likely to go up in value in Dynasty Superflex leagues. And so you look at him, going to increase in value insulated, not in danger of being replaced. He checks multiple boxes for types of players we want to invest in. Dak Prescott, naturally, is a player you should buy this offseason. The next one.
Then you got Marv. I wonder how many people are against this idea. I don't know how much Marv in the offseason is going to maintain value like we originally thought, because he has been relatively disappointing this season. He hasn't been disappointing enough, in our opinion, to really knock him that much in our rankings, because guess what? We didn't have him ranked as high as a lot of people did in our personal Dynasty rankings that you can get at flockfantasy.com/domain. Use code domain. But look, with Marvin Harrison Jr., he's likely to increase in value. He's not in danger of being replaced. Same sort of situation as Dak Prescott, right? They drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. to be their alpha option down the line, down the road. And yeah, did they want that to happen this year immediately? Yes. He still showcased it in flashes. He showcased his explosive ability. I think Marvin Harrison showed what his ceiling could be. which is good enough for me.
Yeah.
Honestly, we have become so spoiled with rookie wide receivers exceeding expectations and producing at a higher level than we initially expected, and they're happening in unprecedented situations. The ones where we anticipate them to produce immediately sometimes aren't happening to the level that we expect them to, based off of the data that we have for the other guys that produced way more than we thought they would. Case in point, Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Nabers this season, who will both finish the season as wide receiver ones, which is insane. Don't knock Marvin Harrison Jr. and what he can do based off of what Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas Jr. are doing. They are not the same players. They are not in the same situation. They do not have the same career arcs. They don't. Marvin Harrison and his long-term outlook, as far as I'm concerned, has not changed. We play Dynasty Fantasy Football in 3-year windows, and we're giving Marvin Harrison Jr. a year. We gave him this year. He's got that buffer. Now it's time to produce in 2025, but we can definitely count on that happening, I think.
But here's the thing. The dude's name is Marvin Harrison Jr.
The name value alone.
How quickly do you think the Dynasty community is going to give up on
when
this
he
guy?
puts up 3 straight productive games?
He's one of the best. He's one of the best. He's one of the best guys to invest in, just purely based on the fact his name is Marvin Harrison Jr. And a lot of times that's all it takes for Dynasty players. Remo Odunze, he's a little bit of a different category here. He's a young player with high upside that's value insulated. He's value insulated because 1, he's on a team where they just invested a high first round draft pick in him. 2, he's value insulated because he is a wide receiver. 3, he's value insulated because he's young. And again, we talk about the upside. We know from a production standpoint and from a value standpoint, the upside there is probably second round.
They will hire an offensive coach, and they do have a veteran wide receiver out the door this offseason as well.
And again, Remo Odunze, is he guaranteed to go up in value? No. Is he very likely to go up in value? I would even say I would say likely and not very likely. Likely because I do think there is room. If Remo Odunze came out next year and is still behind Keenan Allen, is still behind DJ Moore, and he did the same thing he did this year, he would obviously lose value. And I think that's possible, but I think that's unlikely. I feel like it's more likely that Remo Odunze is going to step into his role as a good wide receiver in the NFL.
Well, even if Allen does come back, in my opinion, the off chance, what did you just see in Seattle?
Yeah, I mean, you saw the younger wide receiver finally elevated above the veteran.
Lockett, even though they brought him back.
And Tyler Lockett's going to get cut now. So,
right.
The last guy.
Brandon Ayuk, again, we already mentioned Brandon Ayuk as an example. He's got the contract insulation, and you've got the questions with CMC and just him aging, even though we do think personally that CMC is pretty decent value right now
really
to invest in the offseason. But George Kittle isn't getting any younger. And Deebo Samuel specifically is the big guy for me. I think Deebo Samuel, his contract is up, or what he's guaranteed is up this offseason. They've got to pay Brock Purdy sooner rather than later, and they can't pay everyone and every single offensive weapon that they've been able to for the past couple of seasons. Deebo Samuel, I think, is going to be the first guy out the door because he it gets consistently banged up. He hasn't been consistent from a production perspective this year. He hasn't been productive period really at all this year, and I think he's going to be trying to get his last paycheck, the biggest paycheck he can find in the open market, and San Fran just isn't going to be willing to do that when they clearly prioritize Brandon Ayuk with that contract extension over what they want to do with Deebo Samuel long term. So Ayuk has really, really great insulation. He's got the talent ability. He can play a true wide receiver one sort of X role with big playability down the field. You can't turn that down in a Shanahan offense. So,
and then some riskier assets to invest in. They're not bad to invest in. They're riskier. And I say not bad because Chase Brown's the first one here. He's riskier. I have Chase Brown shares. I'm keeping a good amount of my Chase Brown shares all offseason. I just am. The reason he's riskier is because he has an uncertain value track. He could go up or down in value this offseason based on what happened. And really,
this running back class.
The running back class throws a loop through things. He's on a rookie deal. Doesn't have a ton of team investment. They also have Zach Moss there. That team is probably going to go through either a new coach or, go through a complete kind of revamp. So there's an uncertain replacement status. All these guys kind of are the same thing, and the next guy is as well.
Yeah, Tyron Tracy, I'm way less certain about Tyron Tracy than I am about Chase Brown. I prefer Chase Brown miles ahead of Tyron Tracy, honestly. I think Tyron Tracy, of the guys that you're to invest in on this list, he would be the lowest guy that I would recommend that you invest in right now because there's a ton that's up in the air in New York. Brian Dable's job is technically in jeopardy. You could see a surprise firing there. I don't think it's going to happen, but again, they're not The one thing that Tyron Tracy has going for him is they're probably not looking at investing in the running back position primarily right now. They're probably looking at offensive line. Quarterback obviously will be the first thing they look at, but they want to protect the quarterback, and that's been a big concern over the past couple of years and a big reason why Daniel Jones has fallen off as much as he has, even though we never thought he was really that good. The offensive line did not help him at all. Yeah. They invested in Malik Neighbors. They've got the wide receiver there, but they could go for a second option there. They need a second option to go along with Neighbors. There are so many different routes that they could go. We didn't even mention the defensive side of the ball. Running back is the last priority that they have. They might wait a year or two until they even look at that position, because that's going to be a hard rebuild.
And both these last two guys, Ricky Pearsall, uncertain value track. He's not guaranteed to go up in value. He's not likely to go up in value. He's kind of neutral. And
draft capital is good though, and Debo's on the way out.
Exactly. But they could easily draft over him. So who knows? Uncertain replacement status. Same thing with Isaiah Pacheco. I like Isaiah Pacheco. I have some shares. I'll keep some shares. The value track we don't really know about, and they could easily replace him this year, or they could just bring in somebody that's going to share it with him. He never did really get back to the point this year where he was taking 70-80% of snaps. And
at this point, he has a consistent injury history. He's gotten hurt every single year that he's gotten a Bill Cowher.
So again, a lot of these guys are running backs, and that's by design. Now, how do you take all of this and implement it? I'll let you start here, but these are just some practical ways to kind of implement all of these strategies into your dynasty.
Yeah, so we mentioned down tiering all the time, and that is going to be a big thing that we generally recommend for you guys. Make sure you're doing this in specific cases. This doesn't mean that you down tier from Justin Jefferson anytime that you have the opportunity. Now, for hard rebuilds, if you've got Justin Jefferson and no one else, we're going to recommend that you down tier from a guy like JJ. But in general, when we say down tier, we're recommending that you spread out your value across as many high value upside assets as possible. This is one of the most common recommendations that we give to people in our team blueprints, our live team blueprints, our blueprint 2.0s. We tell people all the time, target assets that have significant value upside. Do not target players or hold on to players that have, outside of your Jamar Chases and JJs and Pukas, make sure you're not holding on to those guys that have reached their value ceiling and are more likely to decrease in price than move up even further. So Devontae Smith and Zay Flowers, for example, right now. These are two guys that, again, you could say I'm totally wrong on this. They could skyrocket up boards, and I could be totally wrong based off of a plethora of circumstances that are unexpected that could happen this offseason and over the next 12 to 18 months. But they are guys that, from a production perspective in their given situation, have relatively capped production ceilings. And more likely than not that those guys have more room to move down than move up into the Brian Thomas and Garrett Wilson range. I don't think that's super unreasonable to say right now. What we're recommending for you is to down tier from a guy like Devontae Smith, who is a perennial, is that the right word? Perennial wide receiver 2. Annual, perpetual wide receiver 2 in his own offense, with Saquon Barkley in the backfield for the next 2 seasons at least.
Talking about perennial.
Did you seriously just make that joke? Oh my gosh. Anyways, Devonta Smith is a guy where I would want to down tier from him and target a guy like Brandon Ayuk plus. You're getting the value upside in Brandon Ayuk, who has the upside to be a true wide receiver 1 in his own offense because he's not competing with an A.J. Brown. And you can get draft capital on top, significant draft capital on top. Those are the type of down tiers. That's a great example that we'd want to be looking at. So keep that in mind when you are down tiering. Spread out your value. Try to get as many extra assets as you can that are going to increase in value. That includes current players. That includes draft capital. Value concentration is incredibly dangerous. Too much value concentration is incredibly dangerous, and it's going to limit the overall moves that you can make. And it really is, in a lot of ways, putting all your eggs in one basket. If you have all your value in 2 or 3 players, 4 or 5 players even, then you're risking 2 of those players falling off, losing a ton of value. And what happens to the overall portfolio and value of your entire roster? It falls as much as your top players fell because you didn't have enough value investment in any other depth pieces that could increase in value while some of your top guys fell. So that you kind of ended up being net zero or maybe even net positive because some of the lower guys you invested in increase in value that much.
And people are going to say, okay, domain guys, you're saying to up tier, but you're also saying to down tier. So which one is it? Yes. The answer is yes. No. What's the answer? Which one is it? Yes. Mm-hmm. And then, so here's how you really like kind of take all this and implement it. Track community rankings that update frequently. We've got biggest risers and fallers already published on the homepage and the dashboard of your Flock Fantasy account. You can track players there. We're gonna have ADP here coming very soon. Lots to come. You're gonna be able to track the market like crazy on the Flock Fantasy site. So use code domain when you sign up. But you're gonna track situation as well, injuries, negative news. Remember Jordan Addison, the dude cannot drive a car for some reason. I have no clue who taught him to drive a car, but somebody did a really bad job at that.
He was such a screaming sell, and he became such a screaming buy.
Right away. He was a sell because of his on-field performance and high touchdown rate, and then became a buy because people shorted him for something stupid, right? Mm-hmm. So track situation and track the news. Trade away your riskier players for safer ones. That seems obvious, but we talked about kind of going into that in this video. Hold them until you get closer to the season. Your worst case scenario is your roster maintains its value. That's worst case. If you invest in the right pieces, your roster can go like this over the offseason. That's worst case scenario.
It only happens if you make moves.
It only happens if you make moves, but if you make the right moves, 95% of the time your roster is going to increase in value from this much to this much. There is a tool that you can use that I've used before where I kind of tracked all of my Dynasty teams combined and their combined value. And every year what you can see is my Dynasty portfolio as a whole of all my teams trickles up, and then we get into like August and it goes way up. And that is the absolute goal. That's what we're trying to do here. And when you get there, there will be no shortage of buyers for your valuable assets, right? Yeah, congrats. You place your value in a high-end cornerstone asset like Jamar Chase, or you down tier into Brandon Ayuk, or you've got young valuable assets. You're never going to have trouble selling those people. And then what you can do, and this is the final end goal, everything boils down to this right here. Use your value to balance youth and production
so that you can win your championships, win money, because money is so freaking cool that it actually is on Blueprint 2.0. Right under the DVM right
Shoot, I didn't know that.
Isn't that cool? And I don't want to make this, gosh, I made such a weird throat noise. That was so weird. I like inhaling.
That could have been a mic drop and you got on your...
I don't want this to be a huge plug or anything. Like, I genuinely mean this. We have a trade finder at flockfantasy.com that is so helpful for experienced Dynasty veterans and brand new Dynasty players who are, doing their first startup right now or in a couple weeks or did just a couple weeks ago. And this is their first year playing Dynasty. This trade finder is able to give you an idea of what type of deals you can make for specific players. So if you're like, okay, I understand that you want us to target Brandon Ayuk domain guys, but how can I actually do that? What players can I move? What sort of combinations are you looking for me to acquire Brandon Ayuk plus? You can use that trade finder and you can plug in Brandon Ayuk's name and it's going to show you the most recent 150 deals that have been pulled off involving Brandon Ayuk over thousands and thousands of Dynasty leagues. Too many times people in your league will tell you, oh, that trade never, ever would happen.
Wrong.
Incorrect. There are thousands and thousands of Dynasty leagues all over the country, all over the world,
all are different.
Plenty of deals happen, and every single one is different. So if you can find the right combination that works for your league mate, your league with the value of that specific player, you can get some really, really good values, and that trade finder really helps out. So if you want to use code domain, sign up for the annual MotherFlocker too. You'll get that trade finder. You'll get a trade calculator. You'll get all of our exclusive expert rankings. You'll get exclusive personalized advice from us. You get a free team blueprint when you sign up for the annual MotherFlocker tier using code domain. All of that and more, like the list just goes on and on and on. And you can ask us and we can tell you literally everything that it offers. There's not enough time in this video. But again, kind of a plug, kind of not, because I genuinely believe that the features that we offer are going to help you get better at Dynasty and give you examples and ideas when it comes to making trades specifically.
Make sure you drop a like. Make sure you're subscribed. We appreciate you guys. Peace out. We'll see you later.